good evening. I'm here to talk to you about insightful design, or maybe more appropriately, I'm going to talk about creating problems. Most people like to avoid problems. We like to run away from them. We like to get to a solution really quickly. We don't like when things are complicated and mess up, and we really prefer to move away from problems as quickly as possible. And we build systems and structures that enable us to do this. I'm hoping by the end of my talk that some of you, like me, will end up seeing that problems are a really interesting material and something that we should be working with quite systematically and intentionally. So before I go into how we figure out good problems, I'm going to talk a little bit about solutions, because there's a reason we like solutions. And there's a reason why designers like designing clothes, and we like designing teapots, and we like designing chairs. And the reason is that we know these problems. I mean, the teapot is there to transport boiling water and making you able to pour a cup of tea. It's a well-known problem. So as long as the problem is well known, we can use all sorts of materials and we can go crazy. You know, we've created this problem of us needing to be dressed, and people solve that in, you know, a myriad of different ways. So solutions and the creativity that exists around solutions are there for a good reason. However, quite often we don't actually know what the problem is. And this is where that approach, the approach of trying to find really amazing creative solutions, doesn't work. It only works when we know the problem. So moving on to sort of my approach to this, I've only ever worked with the digital design. So the digital as a material is a little bit different. It's not tangible, and it sort of runs like water, and it doesn't really want to be shaped. It flows through with data points and interfaces and input modality and feedback loops. And behind the scenes, there are a lot of people who are trying to make these data flows sort of feel like a coherent experience for all of you. So the digital opens up this whole space of, you know, we need to find a different way of shaping something. And if we're going to work with digital design, we need to use different tools. One of those tools is a user journey. So whenever you're doing something, someone somewhere has decided that there is a sunshine scenario of you completing a user journey in some way. Now, for instance, if you're going on holiday, you might look online and you might book your flights and book your car and book your hotel. And each of those little moments of transition, each of those little sort of touch points, someone somewhere has designed those. And someone somewhere has thought of the whole journey, your whole holiday, and thinking, how can I sort of get my solution into this holistic user journey? How can I get in there, and how can we, design something that makes sense for the user? So this is where, again, digital design becomes a little bit like life. That you go through a series of transitions, you go through a series of movements through life. And we all really like the sunshine scenario. So we all really like this sort of going from the beginning to the end, and we're all successful, and you transition beautifully from one stage to another. Well, again, as a digital designer, we actually only start with the sunshine scenario, and then we move really, really quickly into a specific moment of transition. And then we try to figure out how this can break down, because we know it will. And we know there are going to be bugs, and we know that people will do something that we didn't anticipate, and we know that there is some kind of a feedback loop that's not going to work, and the internet is going to break down, and all of these things. So we know that breakdowns will happen. So a lot of my job is to try and figure out how things break down, including myself. But that it sort of mirrors back. So in each of these little moments of transition, I'm going to jump into a little one and see if it makes sense to you. So one little tiny user journey is you walking into a room and wanting to switch on the lights. And that seems like a sort of everyday thing, but it's actually a little journey. You go in, you feel your way, you can feel the light switch, and then there's a sort of tactile feedback, so you can actually feel which state the switch is on, and you can see whether or not the light has been switched on. And then you switch the light turns on. Again, our sunshine scenario, everything is working perfectly. So this is great, except when you go in, you switch on the light and the light doesn't turn on. Then you have the problem. You have this little touch point and you have a completely everyday thing, but the situation is broken down. Then the question becomes, so what do we actually do here? We have a problem. Then you can start sort of framing and reframing that problem. You can say, well, most likely it's because the light bulb needs changing, and you can try that, and if that doesn't work, well, most likely it's because maybe a fuse has blown. Well, then you can try and fix that problem. If that doesn't work, well, then you're probably in a little bit of a bigger situation, and there might be a blackout in your area, or there might be some other situation going on. But this is that little thought process that I think most people can follow is something, again, that we as digital designers look at all the time, because you can't just look at the problem from one angle. You need to constantly be able to reframe it and frame it in order to find out how do you tune in to the right understanding of the problem in order to find how you solve it. So this sort of, you can maybe tell that you... I don't know if I started out being neurotic or it's something that sort of came with being a digital designer, but you sort of become a person that looks for trouble. You're in the supermarket and you're just seeing that those queues could work differently, and then every time you fill out a form online and you get redirected and then you have to go back because something went wrong and they didn't save the thing, yeah, exactly. And then so anyone who's had that experience of sort of feeling that frustration, you're basically all digital designers and you're thinking like digital designers. So I used to teach, or I've taught many projects, and part of what I used to talk to my students about when they were starting out a project was to figure out sort of what problem and what approach would you like to work with. And one thing could be sort of, I would like to do research for design. So that's basically going out into the world, looking for a meaningful problem that will solve all of humanity's stuff. That would be great. There's a lot of stuff you can do there. Okay, and then other students would come in and say, no, I want to build something. So you basically, okay, so you want to do research through design. So you want to build something and throw that into the world and see what happens. And then other students would come and say, oh, no, I want to do research of design. So I want to basically look at what other people do, or look at how other people sort of have built something, or look at a system and how it works and where it breaks down and how you can fix it. So these are sort of three ways, and you can almost tell that it's kind of, you can look at the world at large, or you can look at the world by creating something into it, or you can observe the world and sort of see what's going on and try and understand it. So there are lots of good problems out there. They're just waiting to be sort of engaged with. And I have three sort of base concepts that work for me, at least, when I engage with problems. So the first, to sort of assess, am I dealing with a good problem? Is this a good problem I'm facing right now? So the first one is relevancy. So it has to be relevant for me, or for somebody else, or for the world at large, or for society. So I have to find something that's relevant. And then the paradox comes, because then if it's relevant for me, I might assume that it's relevant for everybody else. But it's not necessarily so. So when I say relevancy, I'm not really talking about it being sort of universally relevant. I'm talking about the concept of trying to tune in to understand how a problem is relevant, who it's relevant for, why is it relevant, and what can we do about it. So there's a whole sort of dialogue around the concept of relevancy. Another concept that really works for me is sense making. Does it make sense? Problems, as I started out by saying, are really, you know them when you see them because they make you feel uncomfortable. They make you feel anxious, or they make you feel sort of slight tension in your body, and you get really frustrated and you want to escape the situation. This is where sense making is actually really important. What I mean by that is it's actually about sticking to that problem and staying with it long enough for it to make sense. We're living in a world where things are moving incredibly quickly, and if you're bored, you'll just switch, flick a switch, or you'll change channels, or you'll Yeah, okay. This is me swiping on YouTube. I'm not really sure what that was. That was a strange gesture. Anyway, everything is being rushed, and every time we get to that point where we feel that tension in our bodies, we're very, very well trained in trying to escape it, and we're actually taught that that's a good thing. And that brings me to my third point, which is if you're just looking at the world and you're saying, okay, I have to find relevant problems and they have to make sense to me, you're basically just looking at a world of pain. This is what people don't want to look at, right? Because this is overwhelming to us. So the third, and what leads you out of it is the sense of empowerment. It's a sense of feeling I can actually do something about this. I can actually acquire the right knowledge. I can actually acquire the right competencies. I can actually engage the right people in solving this problem. However, we've created educational systems that focus on the opposite. So we've created systems that basically educate for submission rather than empowerment. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we teach young people and children to answer the question correctly. And that's what education is. Here is the problem, give me the right answer. Here is the problem, give me the right answer. And if you've been told your whole life that there is such a thing as the right answer, and if you've never been taught to challenge that question, to ask your own questions, or to figure out if there's another problem entirely somewhere else that is even more relevant than the one that you're dealing with, you're going to end up feeling completely powerless. Because when you discover that the world doesn't work by there being a challenge that there is a correct question to, you get overwhelmed and you get depressed and you get anxious and you feel completely powerless. So this is where I think we have a massive challenge, and I think design thinking can actually help us do that, because we love problems. They're not scary, they're not evil, they're actually this material. And once you start realizing that you don't have to know the answer in order to engage with a problem, the world opens up. So why is this important? To me, we are facing a lot of problems on a global scale. We are facing environmental problems. We are facing problems of social inequality. We are facing problems of resource allocation and distribution. We don't know the answers to these questions. We don't even know what the right questions are to ask. So if we want to deal with this, we need to get to a place where we open up. And I believe that seeing problems as a useful material for us to engage with is a step in that direction. And that's the essence of insightful design.